Vivaldi's Griselda is a completely surprising piece. I think we'll be doing not quite the American premiere, but really the first time I think people look at the work with its full dimensionality. Vivaldi as an opera composer is not that well known, but in Italy there's been a fantastic move to reclaim him as one of the great opera composers, and a bunch of wild, avant-garde, insane Baroque musicians have been making these sensational recordings. And so, in fact, you're just musically, they knock your socks off. For one thing, you know, we have gotten so used to hearing Vivaldi cooked by, shall we say, old-style Italian restaurants. And not quite served al dente. And what's so cool is to actually have the real flavors back and to have the real wildness of musical imagination and temperature. And it's truly like eating in Italy as opposed to eating Italian food at a mall. You know, it's just a way different experience. And Vivaldi needs to be cooked with this super fresh, amazing, highly spiced ingredients, and the actual aromas need to just knock you out. And it's a highly energized and sensuous form. He wrote it feeling a lot. It's very personal. And I think some people think of Vivaldi as interchangeable, you know, elevator music, sewing machine, you know, Baroque music just by the yard, and, you know, on and on and on and on and on, and kind of all a little bit the same. Stop that when you come to Griselda. This guy put his heart and soul into it. He had to convince her he meant it. And so the music is so heartfelt and very personal. And nothing is by the book. It really has this very surprising, unexpected textures. I mean, partially some of the main Vivaldi tropes that you know from the famous concertos, the nightingales and the birds and the storms at sea, and, you know, nobody can make a winter storm like Vivaldi, so he does a bunch of them in this, and there's a whole bunch of nightingale arias, and everybody's imitating the sad nightingale, and, you know, okay. I mean, he knows how to do that stuff. And now, I should say the original material had plenty of frisson. The original material comes from Boccaccio, who was the Chaucer of Italy, right? The medieval storyteller, the guy who wrote these very bawdy tales. In this case, the Decameron, which is, you know, 100 stories people tell each other to while away the time that are very sexually involved. And because they're whiling away the time, not just storytelling. And Griselda is the last story of the 100 stories. So it's the climax. And the story is, frankly, horrifying. You read it and you are simply horrified. You say, this is impossible. How can this be allowed? And that's very much what medieval writers had in mind, the late medieval writers. They really wanted to push your buttons. They wanted to create a protest movement. They wanted you to leave the theater saying, that is unacceptable. This has to change. We cannot allow that to continue. So the story was absolutely meant to outrage you and meant to make you say, now this is just not right. Great Italian writers like Petrarch in the generation after said this is simply, the Griselda story is the greatest moment in the history of Italian literature. This is the high point. You know, the story became so powerful and shocking because its impact is so huge that every generation had to react to it. And because Boccaccio put it as the last story of the 100 stories, you couldn't miss it. I mean, it was clearly he meant this one to stick in your craw, to stick in your memory, to stay with you. You know, and after all 100 stories, suddenly this one ends with a bang. Sometimes it's been called in English the patient Griselda. It's a woman who is so wronged by the man in her life, so utterly wronged, And yet she never complains. She doesn't throw anything back at him. She accepts it. It's horrifying. You're so upset. And the injustices pile up, and she doesn't say a word. And Vivaldi plays on that. Boccaccio, of course, plays on that. You get more and more worked up the more she's calm and patient and refuses to lose her cookies and refuses to do back to other people what they do to her. And it's this unbelievable example of real human nobility, which is, you know, here in America, we're complaining if our Starbucks coffee is too lukewarm or there's an extra shot of syrup. You know, this is a woman going through nightmare, hellish things, who will not complain, who will not become unpleasant, who keeps her cool and keeps her dignity. And in this day and age in America, where everyone's selling themselves for anything, and Republic humiliation is the specialty du jour, you know, and everything is about some crappy new reality TV thing where there's nothing too demeaning that people are incapable of doing, especially for an audience. It's incredible to see someone hold themselves with that kind of deeply fine integrity. And what makes the opera so moving is all the other characters are desperate for sale and are willing to go whichever way the wind blows. And this one woman says, no, I stand here, I stand for this, and that's it. And I know who I am, and the rest of you people clearly don't know who you are, which is why you're panicking and running around and willing to say or do anything. And I'm not willing to say or do anything. And if this is what that means, fine, I'll take it. Because I am not going to run around and act desperate, beg people, you know, and or go along with something that is simply wrong. You know, that will be enough. So the piece itself is startling because Vivaldi has written this music that is the music of desperate people. You know, everybody knows Baroque music, you know, these arias that, you know, and these long da capo forms with these incredibly florid vocal passages. You know, in this piece, the Vivaldi uses that florid vocal thing to show people so crazy, so desperate, so willing to do the most idiotic things and go along with the most appalling, obviously completely wrong things going on. So you watch Vivaldi's vocal writing is very extreme, you know, as it is in his concertos where people are doing this wild, you know, torrents of notes. And it's because people are so extravagant in doing the wrong thing and so desperate and so beside themselves and don't really know what they're doing and are willing to try anything. And so it gives the music a kind of wildness and freshness that is super theatrical. And then Griselda herself is just a total heartbreaker because she just is a rock. She is so solid. She is so fine. She has, you know, so much beauty and power. And it's so great to see in this day and age a spectacular role for a woman. And what's so marvelous is this piece, the woman anchors the whole night in the most powerful, just emotionally centered way. And you get really moved by it. Her courage and her fineness and her emotional courage is so extraordinary. And to see that in America right now, hello, what a wonderful thing. Somebody who's just not for sale. And she's not for sale. So everybody else just doesn't know. Her husband is putting her through all this to quote-unquote test her. And everyone, you know, will have their ideas of what they think about that. And Vivaldi paints this incredible picture of this man who kind of knows he's wrong, but doesn't know how to stop. And everything just charges on in completely the wrong direction. And that is a musical portrait that is unforgettable. Those arias that he sings are amazing because he's saying, you know, it has to be this way, but Vivaldi musically gives him weird, strange stuff where you know he knows. It's a brilliant act of composition on Vivaldi's part. Those arias are really treasurable, very rich. You know, the usual Baroque aria, you know, there's the jealousy aria, the happiness aria, the forlorn aria. That, you know, each aria has one affect. You know, that's not the case. In his arias, you feel 20 different things. You get, oh wow, this guy is really disturbed. This guy is very weird. This guy is insisting one thing, but he actually knows a whole bunch of other things. So, you know, it's musically very rich, very, very, very compelling. And of course, the other thing about the piece is vocally, it's a very surprising texture. Because you have the guy, you know, who's putting everyone through all this, who's a tenor, and that's the low voice. And then it goes up. And what's amazing is 2 countertenors, that's right, 2. Yes. And then the other heavy guy who's making war on everybody and, you know, trying to make really, really crude passes at Griselda is played by a soprano. And so, not even a mezzo. And so everything is stratospheric. Everybody is like in this high place. These voices are just in the stratosphere. And so the opera itself is pitched at the desperation level, where everybody's like up there, everybody's just raised their voices a little bit. And so everything's goes up. So it is dramatically at this high-pitched place. And Vivaldi does that shocking thing with Ottone, not only of casting him as a soprano, and he's a real heavy. He's the villain. Yeah. And the villain is sung by a soprano. That is really wild, and not even a countertenor, and not even a mezzo. It's pretty extreme. And then Vivaldi proceeds to give Ottone the melt-in-your-mouth music of the night. And so Ottone has these heartbreakingly beautiful arias that you just like, you melt completely. Or when he gets upset and freaked out, he has, you know, he has his Storm at Sea, which is one of the all-time hit numbers. And so Vivaldi only gives him hit music, like the most spectacular music all the time, and it's a soprano. Gronk will, as he did with Arne de Mar, paint every inch of the stage in his own manner, and far be it from me to presume that I have any idea what that will end up looking like. The one thing that you know when you work with Gronk is if you hire an artist, you will get art. And Gronk makes art. At the end of the day, he's not illustrating, he's not doing something I told him to do. He will do exactly what he wants to do. He will see things his own way, and that will be the thrill. And the thrill will be, you know, hitting the ball back over the net to him. And so that's a joy. And people are alive in a giant, thrilling painting that comes to life with light, with movement, and you know, you're in a spectacular universe. Because, you know, the daughter of Griselda is 15 in the story. And so, of course, we've made it a quinceañera celebration for the 15-year-old. And as you know, with quinceañera, you know, it's a huge outlay, and the whole family gets dressed, and, you know, it's a kind of preparing your daughter to be a bride, you know, when the right moment comes. So it's delirious, it's wonderful, it's daddy's pride, it's a fantastic custom that is just one of the most touching and fun cultural elements of Mexican American culture, and the we know it in California where I live. It's not throughout New Mexico. Different communities treat these things different ways, but we were very inspired by the look, which is, the men all in fabulous tuxedos of different colors, and the women, just everybody dressed in these astounding flowing things with tulle and everything else. I mean, it's just magnificent. And so, and people, looking like, incredible peaches and, like fruit combinations, and just everybody is some spectacular cocktail or dessert. And so all of that is delicious. What's so interesting in this opera is by the time we're done, exactly because of the combination of Boccaccio, Goldoni, and Vivaldi, it's so emotionally rich. And so the palette is very, very, very finely detailed. So you can't make a single statement about any of these characters. Okay. It's all in there. There is pride, but there's also rage, and there's also weird jealousy, and there's so much stuff going on with all these characters, so that nobody is just vanilla, or strawberry or chocolate. Everything is the most elaborate emotional temperature and shifting weather system, and all of that. And that's what makes these arias so marvelous, is because they're so intricate in the emotional range of them. So we will have to see this summer at Santa Fe. I hesitate to characterize any of these characters simply because they are all so surprising, and I intend to keep them that way.